A very warm welcome to our second evening of the Dhamma talk being given by Venerable Ajahn Achalo. And I'd like to share a little bit about his background. Venerable Ajahn Achalo was born in Brisbane, Australia in 1972. And he developed a keen interest in meditation at the age of 20, and a year later left for Thailand to study Buddhism more intently. After a 2-year period practicing in various centers and monasteries, in 1996 Ajahn Achalo ordained as a Theravada bhikkhu under Ajahn Liam at Wat Nong Pat Pong, the monastery founded by Venerable Ajahn Chah. Although most of his training has taken place in Thailand, Ajahn Achalo has also lived in several international forest monasteries in the Ajahn Chah lineage. Ajahn Achalo is deeply grateful for his many opportunities to study with well-practiced monks, as well as for having been able to train in several traditional contexts, including meditation monasteries, remote forests, and periods on pilgrimage. During his years of training, he has received personal guidance from many remarkable teachers, among them Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Pasano, Ajahn Jayasaro, and Ajahn Kalayano. For most of his bhikkhu life, he has considered Tan Ajahn Anan, the abbot of Wat Marp Jan, to be his principal mentor. In addition, he has found the Dalai Lama's instructions an example to be of tremendous value. So, this is just a little introduction to Venerable Ajahn Achalo. Personally, I've had the great fortune to meet the Venerable a couple times now under the sacred Bodhi tree, and he has spent many hours in practice under the sacred Bodhi tree. So we hope that tonight we may hear some wise guidance for all of us who are on the path of the Dhamma, to receive inspiration, wise guidance to entering into the path. Thank you.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namassami. So, it is my honor, pleasure, great fortune even to have the opportunity to speak on Dhamma, encourage people. I ask permission of the Mahatheras, Teris, to speak on Dhamma at the 17th annual Tipitaka recitation ceremony. The text that the gathering is reciting, is it still the Milinda Panha? Yep. Ajahn Amaro was speaking on the Milinda Panha last night also. I was doing a little reading, reviewing today of the sutta. The origin story of the past is interesting, worth touching on before we get into the loftier dhammas of how to contemplate and realize and liberate one's mind. The origin story starts with a naughty novice, when a bhikkhu tells him to take out a pile of dust and rubbish, and the novice refuses, and then the bhikkhu loses his patience and whacks the novice with a broomstick. I find this interesting because my preceptor, Lumpur Liam, the monk who Lumpur Cha chose to be his abbot, after his passing, he said, Lumpur Liam should do this duty. Lumpur Liam says sometimes that purity is born from impurity. And it's worth noting that this is how it all began. The novice was frustrated, but he had elements of right view. So when he went to the river to take a bath, he thought, okay, well, due to this merit of taking out that pile of rubbish, may I become truly great, a great speaker, someone who people have confidence in. And so, I don't know how many thousands or millions of lives later, he became the king, Milinda. The bhikkhu who scolded him overheard that aspiration, and so the naughty novice made the aspiration that may he have the best questions. And the bhikkhu overheard him and said, and may I be able to unravel and answer all of those questions, because I made even more merit because I'm the one that made him take out the pile of rubbish. So there's also a moral in this story. If you're seeking for a fast liberation from samsara, you have to be careful what kind of aspirations you make, because the Bhikkhu Nagasena became an arahant with the analytical knowledges, and that does take literally many, many, many thousands more lifetimes than the fastest path to arahantship, and that was why he was able to remember the Abhidhamma at one hearing. Sometimes you read these things and it seems almost too fabulous, unbelievable, and yet when you understand causal conditionality, sowing the causes, then we have other examples, like Ananda, for example. Ananda could remember everything. Lord Buddha, he made it a condition of being Lord Buddha's attendant, that whenever the Buddha gave a teaching, he would relay that teaching to him. And Ananda remembered from hearing it once. So such beings did exist. I think in Burma now even, there are a number of bhikkhus who can recite the entire Sutta Pitaka by memory. So it's just good to notice, okay, if people are willing to invest profound causes, there can be profound results. When I read the treatise, personally I have some doubts. I'm not completely sure that this king had as many contentious questions and as many doubts as the text relates. What I suspect may be the case is that the bhikkhu who is compiling and writing down is probably collected several stories. It may be the case that that king had several conversations over a period of time, relayed the doubts of other sects, the doubts of lay people that he'd heard, and but it's very entertaining and very effective in terms of whatever one might have doubts about. There's a lot of answers in that text. For myself, my personal disposition as a teenager, I felt like I was seeking something. And when I did my first meditation retreat, a Goenka retreat, on day 8, I experienced some deep peace. I heard Ajahn Goenka's description of the Four Noble Truths, and I realized that I was a Buddhist. I was 19. And from that time, I didn't have doubts in the teachings of the Buddha. There was that sense for myself that I've been looking for something, this is it. I didn't doubt the existence of the Buddha, I didn't doubt the effectiveness of his teachings or practices. The way doubt manifested for myself was, I don't know if I can keep all these rules. I don't know if I can maintain these disciplines. I don't know if I can do what I need to do to realize those same results. However, as someone who is a teacher to some people, I do come across a lot of other people who have a lot of doubts. And I'm sometimes looking, I'm like, why do that to yourself? Why? So the conversation begins with, there's this teaching on not self, Nagasena, and yet here you are. How is that possible? Who is it that's answering these questions? Who is it that's speaking? And Nagasena answers with questions. And this is also a skillful means that I think many teachers can develop. Sometimes you get a bit bored of answering questions, so you can ask questions back. Turn it back, make the people think. And he says, how did you come here, great king? I came here on a carriage. I said, okay. So where is this carriage? Is it in the wheels? Is it in the spokes? No. Is it in the axle? No. Is it in any of those parts? No. And yet you boldly claim you came on a carriage. There's no carriage. And then beginning to understand, yes, conventional reality, things that are come together for a period of time. By convention, we call self another. And other interesting aspects was the conversations on karma. The king wanted to know, because he'd obviously done a lot of research, he wanted to know, why is it that in this life and this life and this life, Devadatta had a superior position, samsarically speaking, to the Bodhisattva? If the Bodhisattva had more merit, more virtue, and if Devadatta was evilly minded, people may remember that Devadatta caused a schism in the Sangha for a period of time. And there are many stories in the Jatakas where Devadatta does, motivated by jealousy and competitiveness, it tries to harm the Bodhisattva. It's like an anti-hero character. And so what the king is doing is he's looking at particular examples where it appears in that moment that Devadatta is superior. And then King Milinda does, I think, Nagasena does what we all have to do in our practice, is take a step back and look at the bigger picture and look at other causes and conditions, not just look at how things are appearing in the present. So he was saying, yes, but what you're not acknowledging when Devadatta was, for example, the royal chaplain to a Brahmin family in Varanasi and the Bodhisattva was a lowly servant, what you don't see is that after that life Devadatta was in hell. And after that life, the Bodhisattva was in heaven. You can take things in that moment in a way out of context. But when the cause, he also said, the cause for the fact of Devadatta being able to have high births and positions of honor was that in the lives where he was a king, as a result of having been generous, in those lives he built bridges, he built roads, water systems, parks. He did things which benefited great numbers of beings. And those previous good acts gave him positions of influence. But his tendency was to have a position of influence, try to harm the Bodhisattva, fall again, past merits ripen, do good things, fall again. And the Bodhisattva was good and better and better and best. And it's a very important thing to consider. If Devadatta simply had the recognition of his potential and set the aspiration, okay, he wants to be great like the Bodhisattva, if he set the aspiration that he too will be a Buddha, there's no need to be contentiously vying with the Bodhisattva. It's like what happened is in that final life he wanted to gain the honor, the respect of that Buddha. Whereas if he'd recognized the kilesa, he's motivated by jealousy, by envy, by competitiveness, by grudge. We have this lovely list of 16 upakilesa that helps us recognize what a negative quality is. Devadatta had many. If he simply recognized his potential, as all of our potential, stopped comparing himself to the Bodhisattva in that fixated way, he could have been great in his own right, currently in Avijji hell, as a result of splitting the Sangha for a period of time. So wonderful when we read these stories. There are many morals. So I think this Milinda Panhara is like, if you have a student who has doubts, or if you have a lot of speculative doubts about karma, about rebirth, about another question was soul. Is there a soul? You say it's not self, you say it's emptiness, but so many others say there is a soul. And Nagasena answered, if there was an abiding soul inside the body, if you pulled out the eyeballs, the soul would be able to see more clearly. If you pulled out the tongue, the soul would be able to taste. It's like this thing that's obstructing. That's not the case. You pull out the eyes, there's no soul in there that sees. You pull out the tongue, there's no soul in there that tastes. It's dependent upon these sense bases that sights, sounds, touch, etc. occur. So again and again, like addressing the doubt with wisdom, mindfulness and wisdom, and intelligent descriptions. There was one small question that, I'm not, Ajahn Amaro is like this walking encyclopedia. He remembers quotes perfectly and remembers who made them, and I enjoy listening to his Dhamma talks. He gave a great talk last night. For myself, I'm more of I talk less and meditate more, and ever since the time of the Buddha, we have had these, and before that, different beings have different character traits, different tendencies, and there is in a way, there is strength in diversity, because these different qualities, when come together, that's part of what makes the Sangha great. There are those who can take a small teaching and expand it. There are those that can take a large teaching and condense it. Different character types. There was one bhikkhu in the time of the Buddha that people used to tease him because he couldn't remember anything. And the Lord Buddha could see that he had not much ignorance actually, and that he would learn quickly. He gave him a white cloth and he told him to carry that cloth throughout the day. And simply through the act of wiping his hands, when the hands got dirty and he got sweaty and he wiped his face and the cloth changed from white to soiled, that bhikkhu was liberated. He didn't need a profound and sophisticated and complicated teaching. He just needed to see with his own eyes that which was clean and white, through contact, became soiled and dirty, or that it's of the nature to change. Enlightened. It can be that easy if a person's spiritual powers and spiritual faculties are right. So the question that I read today that I liked, that I'd like to speak a little bit about, was King Milinda asked Nagasena, what is the mark of faith? Or another way of asking that question might be, what is the sign of one who has faith? And the answer was very simple. Overcoming of doubts and aspiration. So I take that 300-page text and I like that one sentence. So when we look at the things that we doubt about and how much existential angst that causes us, where do I come from? Where am I going? Why is life so unjust? Why, why is it like this? Why isn't it like that? All of the unreasonableness seeming nature of the world. And when we come across the Buddha's teachings and we learn a little bit about karma, we learn about rebirth, we learn about the potential of liberation, we learn about the Four Noble Truths, and we develop some faith. Okay, there are these Four Noble Truths, the Buddha realized them, he was liberated through realizing them, and then even though we may not have realized it yet, we now have a paradigm, a model, and something we can contemplate, which makes sense. There is this fact of dukkha. There is the cause of dukkha. There is the cessation of dukkha, and there is the path leading to the cessation of dukkha. When we have these elements of right view, we can cut out so much unnecessary suffering in terms of wondering why it is the way it is. We don't need to do that. Lord Buddha explains that he understands Dhamma like all of the leaves on the trees. But what he prefers to teach is a handful of leaves, the cause of suffering and the path that leads beyond suffering. That's what he would prefer to focus on, is that there are other examples when someone was shot by a poison dart and they want to know what kind of wood was it, what kind of poison was it, who shot the dart, what were the feathers. Buddha says, don't do that. Just pull the dart out quickly. We get these. So the Four Noble Truths is, the dart is craving, attachment and clinging. Pulling it out is the Noble Eightfold Path. And the result is the mind will be liberated and experience the reality of non-grasping. So we have faith in that. And when we have faith in that, we also now we have an aspiration, we have a goal. We now know the Buddha realized Nibbana. Nibbana exists, or it can be realized. There is a path to realize it. It's not just Buddhas that realize it. We're talking about the potential of conscious beings. The Buddha sets the first example. The Arahants, when he teaches the first disciples and they realize what he realized in terms of liberation, it's the proof that this training, this Eightfold Path, when cultivated, when practiced, leads to liberation for whomever practices it. So we derive faith from that and we develop our aspiration. Okay, I too want to realize the cessation of suffering, just like the Buddha and the Arahants. So the mark of one with faith is one that overcomes doubts. There is all of the questions we can ask, right? Like, what's the meaning of life? Or why is life so unjust? All of these things we can contemplate, which are in some ways Lord Buddha describes as imponderable. Some of these things we can't know the answers. What we can ask is, what is causing suffering? And how do I overcome that? These are questions that have answers. We can answer those questions. We can resolve them. Some people find it helpful to do a lot of study. And Ajahn Amaro was talking last night about Nibbana, the process of realizing Nibbana, because Nagasena describes Nibbana through many metaphors in Milinda Panha. But he kind of condensed it and basically explained, Ajahn Amaro was saying that as long as we believe in the personality, time and space, we cannot experience or perceive liberation, because we're grasping at a reality that doesn't exist. It's a delusion. And so for myself, for the last 2 weeks, I was meditating about 9 hours a day. I like to face the chedi. I like to meditate 8, 9 or 10 hours a day. And I've done that somewhere between 200 and 300 times here. And the reason I like to do that is, in terms of being practical, my teacher Ajahn Anand talks about temporary liberation. We've got this idea of final liberation as an arahant. But there is what my teacher describes as temporary liberation, so that if you're doing a half an hour sit, and there's quite a few of the 5 hindrances, sensual craving, irritation or aversion, some restlessness, some sloth or some doubts, then as we continue to meditate, you might experience a 5 or 10 minute period where there's much less of that. And then after the half an hour, 45 minutes, you will feel more energy, more clarity, less suffering. Just in that half an hour or 45 minute period of time, you can experience a lessening of suffering through letting go things which cause suffering. For myself, trying to be a good meditation monk and trying to train myself sincerely and be a good example for others, when I take a 9 hour period of time, sometimes it might be the case that there's a sleepiness for the first couple of hours, but I don't get up. When it's time to go to the bathroom, I do. And then after a light breakfast, I'll come and meditate again. When you're giving yourself a really long period of time, what happens is, it's all the same stuff, like, I'm tired, I need to sleep more, what am I doing here? Okay, it's personality view, it's time and space, me here, I don't want to be here, I want to be in my bed, I'm tired. But what happens is when you keep applying the effort, keep applying the mindfulness, be aware of one in-breath, ut, be aware of one out-breath, do, and the mind realizes that you're not going to give in, you're not going to go back to bed, you're going to just keep trying to be mindful. What happens is the sense of self and the sense of time and the sense of space disappears for periods of time. And then when the mind experiences peace, sometimes the peacefulness that a mind can experience has more of a component of samadhi. Sometimes the peace that the mind can experience has more of a component of mindfulness and wisdom. So it might be the case that peace simply becomes the object. A still, cool, bright mind is the object. There's no conceiving of a self, there's no concepts about a place or time. It's just peace in that moment. Other times it might be the case that the mind goes from, I'm tired, I don't want to be doing this, to being aware of the feelings associated with tiredness, and those feelings arising and changing and arising and changing and arising and changing, and the feeling of being a self goes away, and being contentious with the moment goes away, and there's just that which knows arising and ceasing for a period of time without contentiousness is very peaceful. And so when most of us, if we take the opportunity to do a meditation retreat, we can have these kind of insights where when there's a feeling of being a self, bound by time and space, there'll be something to suffer about. If we just keep coming back to knowing the four foundations of mindfulness, form as form, feelings as feelings, mental constructs as mental constructs, and so dhammas as dhammas, that sense of being a self can fall away for periods of time, and factors of, sometimes what's referred to as factors of jhana, rapture, tranquility. This is the nature of a mind, no matter who you are, if you can just consistently be with a meditation object, whatever the karmic story, whatever the nationality, whatever the skin color, whatever it is, gender, if you can just be with your meditation object consistently, rapture arises, tranquility arises, serenity arises. And if you continue to be with your meditation object and contemplate wisely, you can experience insight into not self, or impermanence, or unsatisfactoriness, and then that feeling of being a self will fall away from the mind for a period of time. And then one develops, it's really helpful, really important if you can practice to the point where you do experience that. Because when you do, a lot of fear can come up around not really understanding like that liberation isn't nihilism, that you don't have to destroy the self. So when one experiences for oneself from practicing diligently that the feeling of being a self goes away, simply isn't there, but that there is some kind of diamond-like clarity that knows a body is just a body and feelings are just feelings, and it's for want of a better word, the happiest that you've ever felt. Probably contentment is a better word, or peace, bliss, absence of suffering. When the practitioner can experience the body and the mind without a contraction of a self-view, and experience how pleasant that is, then it becomes possible to develop this quality of unshakable faith, achala sattha. When the practitioner glimpses their true potential, it's true. Even I, when I meditate a lot and practice a lot, can experience deep, deep, deep peace and contentment with no experience of suffering for a period of time. Once one knows that for oneself, through one's own insight, that's when we can commit more and more deeply to the practice, because we know, I can do it. It's simply a matter of laying the causes. It's simply a matter of being consistent, depending on how much we've practiced in past lives, depending on how powerful the spiritual powers are, it can take less time or longer time. But at least we know for ourselves, yes, when I'm consistently mindful, this rapture, tranquility, serenity arises, insight arises, suffering falls away from the mind. This is my potential, this is the potential. And we experience what Ajahn calls temporary liberations. We glimpse deeper truth, ultimate truth. And then the more one experiences that, for small periods at first, 5 minutes of peacefulness, 10 minutes of peacefulness, a flash of insight, a moment where there isn't the grasping of self, this tendency that we're creating for the Eightfold Path to get more powerful, the particular merit that is produced from practice is that the peacefulness gets deeper for longer periods, the insight gets clearer, it's a path that's leading onwards. Those conditions lay more profound conditions for even deeper and deeper insight into the unconditioned. Ajahn Amaro was talking about that last night. The Eightfold Path is the path of conditions that leads to the unconditioned. So, Lord Buddha, when he was enlightened here in this place, he was Lord Buddha. He doesn't say it's easy to glimpse this or easy to experience it. Apparently, according to the legend, he was having some doubts. He doesn't say it's easy. I don't know if I can teach this to be easy because it goes so completely against the stream. They're so attached to perceiving. I don't know if I can teach this to be easy because it goes so completely against the stream. They're so kind of a creator, so attached to perceiving. I don't know if I can teach this outward because it goes so completely against the stream. And apparently, the legend goes, Brahma God came down outward and said, Lord Buddha, please review with your special abilities. There are beings who will understand this. Lord Buddha, the newly enlightened Buddha scanned humanity beings and he saw that it was true that although most beings' minds were like lotus buds in muddy water, there were some in clear water that were getting more voluminous, voluptuous. There were some that were very close to the surface, and there were some that were even above the surface, literally ready to fully blossom. And then he understood it's true. Some beings have the spiritual powers, they will understand these teachings, and he set the intention to teach beings. Apparently the Brahma Deva had trained under a previous Buddha, and I think he was a Sakadagami. He was already established in the path of enlightenment. But he was wondering, how did I do this wondrous, miraculous accomplishment? And he came with this list of the five spiritual powers. And I love to mention this list. I like to mention it here because Lord Buddha was reviewing it right here in this space in one of the weeks after his enlightenment, before he started to formulate teachings. And he made the utterance, these 5 powers, when made much of, when cultivated, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless. So the first is faith. Faith is faith in Nibbana, faith that the Buddha realized Nibbana. Then also faith in one's potential to realize the same thing. Faith that the Dhamma, when cultivated, will cause the same result in oneself. The next is energy, sattha, virya. I think there's a reason Lord Buddha puts these things in this order as well, because faith gives rise to energy. When you have faith that Nibbana exists, and you have faith that you can put an end to suffering, you have faith that you have everything you need, you just need to practice, there's energy arises to practice. So it's good to give some thought to this faith faculty and try to make it powerful. Certainly coming to Bodh Gaya and practicing together like this, we're demonstrating and expressing our faith. After this comes mindfulness. Faith, energy and mindfulness. And again, it's important to have the faith, it gives rise to the energy, because we need to invest energy into maintaining our mindfulness consistently. This is a large focus of Luang Por Chah's training in Thailand. His emphasis was that the monks and nuns should maintain mindfulness in all postures. I do quite a bit of meditation, but he emphasized the Samma Sati, because he recognized that consistency of the Sati is what gives rise to the next of the spiritual powers, which is the Samadhi. It's the right mindfulness that gives a right to right collectedness. And then the final one is the wisdom. When you have steady and consistent mindfulness and clear comprehension, you have some stability that comes from samadhi. You can see the characteristics of nature of phenomena more clearly. The stability of the mind is what makes that possible. So it's like there's two lists, and the 5 hindrances, the things that when you come to sit cause you some problems. And it's important to understand, I've been practicing for 28 years. When I come to sit, it's the same 5 hindrances. It's the same hindrances. The issue is we develop some more skill at recognizing them quickly. We develop skillful means at how to overcome them, and we get more experience of going beyond them for periods of time. So the first one, sensual craving, and the second one, irritation and aversion. The third one, the sloth and sleepiness. The fourth is the restlessness, anxiety, worry. The fifth being doubt. Lord Buddha describes those qualities as the robbers, because bandits, because they steal away peacefulness. But just knowing these 2 simple lists is very, very helpful, because if we get lost in a doubt the meditation method, doubt your own ability, then you're not developing, you're lost in the doubt. So we have to train ourselves to doubt the doubt. See a doubt as a doubt, don't believe it. Keep with the meditation object, keep practicing, recognize that's a robber. And sometimes a doubting mind can be extremely compelling, so you can just say to it, okay, maybe, but you don't believe it completely. Yeah, maybe. Luang Por Chah would use the phrase, mai ne, it's not sure. When you investigate, okay, is there validity to it? It's important to understand that until the first stage of enlightenment, there's going to be doubts about the path and about the practice. So faith is a relative thing. There's periods of time where you will fall into doubts about things. That's normal. But we recognize doubt as a hindrance. Don't waste too much time with it. Keep trying. Keep applying the 5 spiritual powers, because that's what leads to the deathless and merges in the deathless. So, I did also want to give people an opportunity to ask questions if they have, if they did have some. So, I rejoice in your practice. Thank you for the opportunity to encourage, and I hope that you will practice a lot and get great results from your practice. The Melinda Panha text does end with the description that the king developed faith, asked to be a follower of the Nagasena, and after some time gave his kingdom to his son, went forth as a monk, and also became one of the Arahants. So that's how the Melinda Panha finishes, which is very nice. So may you all attain to arahantship, as with fast path, slow path, slowest path, whatever your preference is. The slowest path meaning Buddhahood, right? The analytical knowledge is also being not a fast path. But you can see, Luang Por Man was one of the most celebrated arahants in the Thai tradition of last century, Luang Por Chah's teacher. And he wrote in his, his students wrote his biography. And one of the things that he said to one of his students is that it had been 500 lives since he could have attained to arahantship. But he had the aspiration to be a Buddha himself. After 500 lives, he realized, oh, this is just going to take so long. What if I cash in my chips now, as it were? And but those extra 500 lives was the merit and the special qualities and the amazing abilities that Luang Por Man had, that he regenerated the Thai forest tradition, and I believe he himself had 12 arahant disciples. His abilities to teach, his psychic powers, his knowing what was going on in the minds of his disciples, all of these extra spiritual power, extra qualities that he had because he delayed his enlightenment, but he delayed his enlightenment with the aspiration to be a Buddha. He changed his mind because if you to be a Buddha, you need to receive a prediction from a teaching Buddha of your future Buddhahood. If you've not yet received that prediction, it's not yet carved in stone, as it were. They can change their minds. But the benefit is he became the greatest arahant of the century because he invested 500 extra lives. So whatever your aspiration is, may you benefit as many people as you aspire to, according to your energies, or may you be quickly liberated according to your aspiration. All of these paths are noble and wonderful, and I rejoice in all of them and your practice.
Thank you very much, Venerable, for wise reflections and just going directly into your experience and sharing so openly about some of the hindrances and challenges and also overcoming them through effort, right effort. If this is a wonderful opportunity to ask a question, a personal question that arises from your Dharma practice. We have in front of us someone who is very deeply involved in practice. This is an opportunity, and I will give the priority first to the Venerable Monastics, if there are any questions from the monks or nuns. Bhante, I'll pass the microphone to you. Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante, Bandami, good afternoon. Sometime I have seen your discourses, not very much. Few discourses I have listened earlier. I have got it that you have a very good strength. I personally believe you have a very good strength on meditation, and you have a great priorities on that. Actually, I'm a practitioner for the beginning, almost 3 years. So I am struggling for a long time on sitting. As for I attend to these retreats, for Vipassana retreats, I hardly can sit still for almost 45 minutes. Then I lost my strength. My legs get freeze. I have to move. And after I stop from retreats, then I get more and more weak, and almost I can stand, sit still for 25 minutes. So
Yes.
I have a question on that how to improve for stillness and how to overcome the weakness on sitting still fully and still fully and mindfully to meditate. How to overcome overthinking.
Good question.
These all other questions.
Yes. Good question.
Again, I hope you understand.
Yes.
I am sorry to take lots of time.
I think it's relevant to many people.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Pranava. I have a very great respect for you, and I am very grateful that you have came here to our India.
Happy to
thank
encourage you.
My,
So it's a very good
gratitude.
question. The question is, Venerable in meditation retreat, he can sit for 45 minutes before the cramps and the pain gets unbearable. Outside of meditation retreat, he finds he experiences restlessness after 20 minutes. So this is normal, and I think a really important, very, very important thing about practice is not adding more hindrances to hindrances. So when we see our current limitation, we don't add aversion, ill will to it. This is very, very important. We understand this is my ability now, and we do what we can to the extent that we can, but then we develop an interest in other skillful means. So something that we can refer to the normal monastic model. What normally occurs in a monastic training is that, at least in Thailand, in a training monastery, is that there will be a half an hour chanting session before the sitting session. And it's in a different position, so the monks will be up on their toes, they won't be sitting in the same posture. And what happens is, in doing the act of chanting, ideally, one is recollecting one's faith in the Buddha and brightening and gladdening the mind. If it's early in the morning, oftentimes 3:30 in the morning or 4 in the morning, the act of chanting loudly together in a space which is lit, the sleepiness is dissipating. So that after half an hour there's less sleepiness and there's some brightness already. So that when one comes to sit, one has already been cultivating some bright qualities and some wakefulness. Then it becomes much less likely that we fall straight into sleepiness. Similarly, if we're doing our sit at the end of the day, if we had a very busy day, if we do a half an hour of chanting before our sit, for that half an hour we've had to think about what we were chanting. If it's a chant that we know by memory, we have to put the effort to remember it. If it's a chant that we don't know by memory, we have to put the effort into reading it correctly, saying the words correctly. And what's happening is we're already putting down the day. We're not thinking about the day, we're thinking about the chanting. And then we come to do the chanting. So another thing is that it's not just sitting. So when mindfulness is the issue, when mindfulness gets better, the pain is still there, but the mindfulness is capable of abiding with it without irritation and aversion. So the issue is, what can we do to strengthen the mindfulness? And there are many things that we can do. So one of the things that we do is that we also train in walking meditation. So if I have the experience, I don't do much walking now because I love sitting, and now I have some skills as a sitter. But as a younger monk I did. I would, after the meal, in Thailand you have that one big meal, so it's normal for the monks to do walking meditation after the meal time. So you're training in the mindfulness of the feelings at the bottom of the feet. And it's the same mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings in the body, that we bring to the sitting posture to then know the feeling of the breath. So if we can add a couple of sessions of walking meditation. And in the Thai forest tradition, there were some great masters whose main practice was walking. Not everyone was a sitter. And there are examples of, I'm not like Ajahn, I can't remember everyone's name and the exact occasion, but I remember the stories. There was an occasion where one great master was in the jungle and the tiger was in front of him and a tiger was behind him. And his mind went into absorption in a standing posture. And when he came out of his absorption, the tigers weren't there. Because when the mind goes into a samadhi absorption, nothing can harm the body of the practitioner during that time. So it's that these are wonderful anecdotal stories that help us understand it's not just about the sitting practice. But if you recollect your chanting by memory, you're learning a chant, that's working on your mindfulness, right recollection. When you're doing your walking meditation, your eyes 2 meters in front of you, aware of the feelings at the bottom of the feet, turning around, you're still basically trying to know what hindrances are present, what of the 5 hindrances are present, pacify them, be in the body. When we do our chanting, we do our walking, and then when we come to sit, what normally happens over a period of years is the quality of the mindfulness gets more resilient, more consistent, and then we're able to abide. I still have a lot of pain in my body when I sit, but I don't get a compulsive, I need to get up, I can't stand this anymore. I try not to add that to it. Another thing which is enormously helpful, which makes it possible to just stay a bit longer, is the metta practice. So if we look at the sutta, the 11 benefits of loving kindness sutta, Lord Buddha explains that for one who develops loving kindness, the mind becomes peaceful easily. And all of us want a mind that would become peaceful easily. And here we have Lord Buddha saying, if you develop loving kindness, your mind will become peaceful easily. But we tend to neglect it. And I would encourage us not to. Because suppose you're sitting and there's we do the chanting, and we tend to go from may I be well, may I be happy, to may all beings be free from suffering, may all beings be, and we rush it a bit. Actually, we need to spend a bit more time on the initial stage, because we need to be able to hold the metta citta in the middle of this mind-body phenomenon as an energy. True loving kindness, loving friendliness, goodwill needs to be able to be held there, because that is the space from which it radiates outwards. So it's like you can't have metta for all beings if you don't have quite a bit of it right here. So we really do need to spend some time on that. And the way that works in terms of a practical function, you're coming to sit, there is tiredness, there is pain, you don't want to do it anymore. And then you recognize, here is a sentient being currently suffering, right here. And I want to practice to help all beings be released from suffering. And so you're aware of that painful feeling, that is mindfulness. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. And you just keep adding that to the experience until the pain might still be there, the sleepiness might still be there, but there's a warm and pleasant feeling in the heart that makes it possible to stay for longer. And the more you train with loving kindness in that way, is like, once that loving kindness truly begins to flow in the mind, then you add more beings. My teachers, breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may my teacher be well, breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may my parents be well, breathing in, may I be well, may Wang Mo, Richard be well, may all of the... And you just keep going, and what happens is, the Buddha calls these Brahma-viharas divine abidings. So what I'm talking about is cultivating samatha practices. So often what we want to do is we want to just keep applying the mindfulness to the feeling of the breath, and we're hoping that that's going to be enough. It's not enough. We need our Buddhanusati. We need our metta bhavana. We need our recollection of death. We need our contemplation of the body parts, those protector meditations. And we need to know which tool to use when. And sometimes this is what the benefits of just making a commitment, like what I've done here, I found tremendously beneficial. I used to sit for 10 hours a day. I'm getting a bit older now, so it's 9 hours a day. And Lompo Biak, he told me, actually 8's probably enough, actually, he said. And he's a great meditation master. I was like, okay, well, if Lompo Biak says 8 is enough, I don't do that many in Thailand, 4 or 5 in Thailand, but when I come here, I take 6 weeks. It's my opportunity to do a bit of an intensive workshop. So when you know you're going to have to sit for 2.5 hours 4 times, you've just made some resolute commitment to that and you're going to do it, then you need to find a way to make it bearable. You just give yourself no choice. And once you're backed into that corner, I don't want to be miserable for 10 hours today and 10 hours tomorrow and 10 hours. I need to find a way to make this work. And then you develop skillful means. It's like, okay, what is a grumpy feeling like? How's that experienced? Where is the feeling? What can I do with that? I add friendliness, I add kindness. Okay, what does that do to the feeling? The feeling dissolves, the feeling begins to change. Oh, that's interesting. And so, okay, so for loving kindness to actually work, I have to really mean it. This is a little insight that many of us don't quite get. For loving kindness to work, you have to really mean it. May I really, truly, truly be well. Really. And what happens is when you mean it, a warm, pleasant feeling begins to blossom in your own heart. And then, I can expand that. Okay, well, I look to my left, that bhikku's nodding too. I look to my right, that bhikku's nodding. I look to my left, that bhikku's nodding. Okay, so I expand it. Breathing in, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from sleepiness. Breathing out, may these venerables be well, be happy, may they be free from sleepiness. And it becomes not just about oneself, it becomes about this shared struggle that we're all trying to overcome our hindrances. So the loving kindness practice is enormously helpful. Even when you get knee pain or shoulder pain and you just can't stand it anymore, there's a part of the mind that's contracting around the pain that can't stand it, and there can be another part of the mind which is just fine. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be happy. And then what happens is when you can stay with that part of the mind which is able to be a little bit aloof and contemplate, that's when you're going to notice when it changes. And that's a function of sati, right? The pain's like waves, it throbs, incredible shoulder pain can just be gone. And because you didn't get up and run away, you noticed. And then with that noticing of arising, changing, ceasing, feeling of self disappears, just deep peace, nobody suffering, no painful feelings. But these path factors, they converge in ways. And one of the things I've noticed on many, many occasions, I've had a very difficult morning, and I had no idea that hour number 6 and 7 was going to be pure bliss. The first 5 hours were hard. Even at 29 years of experience, you can have in 10 hours of meditation, a first difficult 5 hours. But not making a problem out of that, just keeping with it. Okay, well, I'm going to keep applying the remedies. I'm going to keep applying the skillfully. Sometimes it's illness, sometimes there's some sickness that makes it harder. But you just keep trying. You keep applying different skillful means, different methods, and you learn how to work with things. And for myself, practicing here, going from 6.5 to 8.5 hours a day was really, really hard. It was really, really hard. And that's about 10 years ago. And once I got to 8.5 hours, going from 8.5 hours to 10 hours wasn't hard. And I even decided with my friend Ajahn Yaniko, I made this vow to do 3,000 hours of meditation here. My friend Ajahn Yaniko, he did the last 1,000 hours with me. So I had a friend, and that was helpful too. And we decided to do 11 hours a day for 10 days. And then after that, we thought, well, we might as well do 12 for one day. We did 12 hours the next day, and the last hour it rained. And we didn't get up. But it actually became fun. It's like, well, this is interesting now. Now it's like a creative challenge. Now I can meditate for 9 or 10 or 11 or 12. Because I know how to support the mind with loving kindness through the painful parts. And I'm looking forward to the peace that I know will come at some point. But we do have to increase the capacity slowly over time, consistently. And I think this is one of the most important keys to practice that probably isn't emphasized enough, is that we need to gently increase our efforts consistently. This is so important, because mindfulness gets stronger over a long period of time with consistency. And if we stop and start and we stop and start and stop and start, it's like it just never gets stronger. Unfortunately, I really wish it wasn't the case. But in my own experience, if I allow myself to have a very lazy month, when I get back to practice, there's a lot of territory to regain. Whereas if I just maintain my every morning, every afternoon, every evening, no matter how busy I am, if I maintain a certain minimum, when it gets time to do more again, the mind can become peaceful and more insightful more quickly. So it's the commitment to a certain minimum practice that we just maintain doggedly, and we have to be really fierce with that. Then increase when we can, take periods of retreat. Then the capacity gets, over the years, gets greater. I wish there were shortcuts. I wish it were easier. But it takes effort and it takes time. So,
I'd like to extend, if any other Venerable Monastics have any other questions, maybe the Bhikkhunis, if there are any questions that you have. Oh, sorry.
Bante, I have two questions
Okay.
that are confusing me while I reading sutta. The first one is about awareness, and the second is feeling. So I read in the sutta, there is a question, what is the mark of awareness? And the answer that Venerable Anasena answer is one of two marks is holding. Maybe I translate wrongly, but that is the word in Vietnamese. So, so one of the marks of awareness is holding. And the explanation below is when you discerning what is beneficial and unbeneficial, what is good, what is bad, and you holding, you follow good, you follow beneficial thing, and you avoid bad, you avoid unbeneficial thing. That is the mark of awareness. This explanation is confused and different to what I discerning about awareness. According to my understanding about awareness, that is discerning, or at least acknowledging. So you acknowledging that is happening, and you understand that is wisdom factor. You understand that is beneficial or unbeneficial, that is good or bad, and you have decided to follow them or not follow them. So for me, that factor is wisdom, not awareness.
So in the Thai tradition, they often talk about sati, which has the function of knowing, not conceptually, but like awareness, right? Knowing with awareness, mindful knowing. And then there's the other thing called sampajanya, which is the sense of context. So that with the sampajanya, there's wisdom, there's discernment functioning. So it's in English, it's translated as mindfulness with clear comprehension. So the clear comprehension part is the part that knows it's wholesome, unwholesome, or neutral. And the mindfulness part knows a form is a form, a feeling is a feeling, right? The discerning part, the clear comprehension, knows it's wholesome, neutral, or unwholesome, worth pursuing or not pursuing, should be abandoned, shouldn't be abandoned. That's the wise discrimination. So they function together. But the awareness, I've never heard awareness described as holding. I've never heard that. So I would trust your own sense for what you experience awareness to be. Yeah. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes the translation isn't great. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, and it's okay to trust your own experience. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just read in Vietnamese version, so maybe I check it again.
Right.
Yeah. And the second question is about feeling. So also in the sutta, I read that there is a feeling in the body and in the mind. According to my understanding, feeling is the mind. So only have feeling in the mind, and feeling in the body is sensation.
Yes.
How
So
I can understand
the way it's translated. This is an important point. Thank you for asking it, because people often talk about physical feelings, and there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a physical feeling. So the body is made of 4 elements, and the body itself doesn't have any feelings. If it did, if somebody died and the corpse was there, you went and you punched the corpse would yell. It doesn't. So what it's described as is feelings arising due to body-based contact. Okay, so it is related to body-based contact. An ant bites you, a bee stings you. It is, but it's not, it's in consciousness, it's in body consciousness that the feeling is occurring. And it's described as feelings arising due to body-based contact. And that is an important thing to understand. Yeah. Mm-hmm. it took me years to work that out. As simple as it sounds, it took me years to work that out. There's no such thing as a physical feeling. There's the 6 sense bases. There's the body consciousness, eye, ear, nose, tongues, body. So the feelings that I'm perceiving in my knee pain is occurring in body-based consciousness. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very helpful as we're sitting for long hours.
Yes.
Okay, so now we'll turn to
Richard
the
has a question, I
lay
think, yeah.
lay community.
Richard has a question.
There's someone behind me.
Yeah.
Oh, Richard.
Bhante, I just have 2 questions. One is easy, one is a bit long.
Okay.
The first one is about this issue of feeling. In the skandhas, we have form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. And I'm always objecting to this term form, because it seems to me it's really talking about sensation, feeling, perception, formation, consciousness. And there's no concept of form as physical form at all. This is a reification that's crept in. Would you agree? I mean, it seems to me there is no other explanation for the 5 skandhas.
I think what you're talking about is how you experience it, right?
Yes.
So you experience it through the nama dhammas. But there is earth element.
But it's only described as when you look at the definition of earth element.
But there's a body there. Conventionally speaking, there's a body there. So Richard has a body.
Right.
Wangmo has a body. Ajahn has a body. So that's the form.
But doesn't that locate me in space and time?
It does.
So therefore, surely it's
the thing is, there is a conventional reality, and then there is the ultimate reality.
Right.
And so they don't. When a person's experiencing the ultimate reality, the conventional reality isn't there, right?
Right.
When they're experiencing the liberated state, there's a wonderful description of Brahma Devas that came to rejoice in Sariputta's radiance when he was abiding in voidness. And these are the most radiant devas with the most amazing samadhi from the highest part of samsara. And they said, and we know not from whence this radiance shines forth. So the mind experiencing the ultimate is, incredible. Even the Brahma Devas come to rejoice in it. And there's no perception. It's abiding in voidness. It's abiding in the insight into ultimate emptiness. But when Sariputta comes out of that, he goes and takes a bath, right? Or he's got to wash the body. So it's there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
My other question is about the 37 path factors.
Right.
Now, you gave a beautiful, short description of the 5 powers. Would you bless us with a description of all the 37? Because the 37 get listed often.
I'm giving a talk on the 8th, and I might...
Could you do that? Could you do that, Bhante?
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
I could give a bit more attention to that if you'd find it helpful.
Thank you so much. That would be
Yeah.
great. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's interesting that the 5 faculties and the 5 powers it's the same list gets mentioned twice.
Yes, for example.
Yeah.
And why that is.
I think the reason that is there is for us to, in brief, I'll just mention that one, because I've contemplated that one a bit, is that these things exist as faculties. So Lord Buddha is pointing to us to recognize that. You have a faith faculty. For the faith faculty to be a spiritual power that's going to lead to the deathless, then we have to have faith in the right thing. And energy is there, but is it good energy? Is it wholesome energy? So it's simply, I think he's giving it that much importance. We need to recognize these faculties are functioning. This is functioning. How do we evolve that so that it becomes a path to the deathless? Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante.
Hello. Good evening, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, you talked about the attachment, and Lord Buddha itself had told that we have to remove oneself from the attachment of any types, just like emotional attachment, materialistic attachments. And so I want to know that how one can remove from the various types of attachment, and while the same time Buddha and Buddhism talked about to live together with the love and compassion. So when you remove the attachment, then how you can implement the love and compassion with somebody else?
So the starting point is there is a lot of attachment in all untrained minds. That's where we start. And Lord Buddha explains that that is the cause of suffering, it's the craving. So avijja tanha upadan, but in the Four Noble Truths it's explained as the three types of craving that cause suffering. It's a process of abandoning it. So what Lord Buddha does is he tells us that in the beginning we should keep 5 precepts. Because when you keep the Panchasila, you have to restrain how much sensuality, you have to restrain one partner, one sexual partner, etc. No, not intoxication. So when you keep your 5 precepts, you're beginning to put your attachments and cravings into a container where it will lessen over time as long as we stay within that container. But then on top of that, he did recommend that once a week one keeps extra precepts, no evening meal, no sex, once a week. And that becomes 52 times a year, right? At the beginning it seems like, oh, why? But when you realize it's 52 times a year, more than a month and a half, where you're keeping 8 precepts, if you do keep them on the lunar observance days, that is having an effect on weakening attachment. And then, as most Buddhist practitioners do, it will take periods of time when you're on retreat, where you keep 8 precepts more strictly for longer periods of time. And the power of the craving in the mind gets less. And in a way, committing to these precepts is an expression of love and compassion. Ajahn Amaro was talking about that last night. It's the offering of freedom from fear. When you make commitment to be ethical, moral person, who give others freedom from fear. So I personally don't see a contradiction to, one can't just decide. I think it's if one's thinking of it as a concept, if one thinks that one can just decide to practice non-attachment, that's just an idea, that's not possible. Attachment is something that takes quite a lot of time to uproot and relinquish. So we start with the fact that we have it. We can't just decide we're not going to have it. We have to contain it and make it less and less and less over a period of time. It's the Brahmavihara practices support that process. So suppose an unskillful desire comes up. I'm bored with my wife, I want to have an affair. Suppose that comes up. It's like, yes, but if you do that, your wife's going to have hurt feelings, she's going to be angry, you're going to lose some of your self-respect. Out of compassion for yourself and your wife, you don't do that. So my teacher Ajahn Anan explains that loving kindness supports the cultivation of mindfulness, because we have that wise way of reflecting that, no, I'm not going to do things which will lead to my having remorse and self-loathing or regret later. I'm going to live a virtuous life and practice a bit of patience with things like boredom and restlessness so that I don't cause harm to others. So the practices of metta and compassion support one in keeping precepts and uprooting and weakening attachment over a period of time, usually lifetimes. So, but we start with the precepts. And
Thank you, sir. So another question I have,
Yeah.
that we do meditation to empty our minds. My always one question arises in the mind that is it possible to live in a socialized world, civilized world? All humans are social mammals. Is it possible to live in this type of society after emptying our minds?
no, it's not.
We do any work.
Do you have a daily meditation practice yet?
Yes, I have started to the meditation
Okay, so
practice. So the basics.
it's not the
thing
case that you
is-
can just make the mind empty and then you can't live in the world because it's empty. That's not how it works. It's I wish it was. I wish it was that easy. It's you will, in the beginning parts of practice, you will have little insights, glimpses into a deeper reality of emptiness. But the feeling of being a self in a world will come back very quickly. And you can't stop it. So you don't need to worry, but you don't need to worry that you're not going to be able to function in the world if you have insights into emptiness. I think what you're asking is, can I have that realization of emptiness and then function in the world? So it's like, by the time you're at that level, yes, because it doesn't start with one insight. It starts with many small insights and builds upon that. And one of the ways they praise Lord Buddha is the praiseworthy qualities of the Buddha, is that although he is fully liberated, enlightened, thus come, thus gone, he understands the conventions of the world and uses ordinary language. So although he's experiencing something beyond, above and beyond samsara, feeling no attachment, no clinging, understands delusion perfectly, doesn't have any of it left, when somebody comes to speak to him, he says, "Hi, so-and-so, how are you? How are the kids? How is the harvest?" He knows how to relate to beings in the conventional world, even though he's abiding in complete liberation from all delusion. So I think we have the example of the Buddha. He does very well. Despite the fact that he realized emptiness, he managed to establish an incredible order and teach a lot of people for 45 years. So yes, it's possible. You can realize emptiness and function beautifully in the world, but it takes time.
Emptiness, so you once empty your mind and again talk to anybody, you do any work, again the thoughts get filled
Well,
in your mind.
we don't meditate just to empty the mind. You meditate to develop mindfulness and wisdom.
Okay.
Yeah. That's probably a better way of approaching it. So
Okay, thank you, I got it.
yes. One more question in the back there.
Sister, if you want to come to the front, and if you don't mind, or the microphone can go.
There's somebody in the back as well. So come.
I'm grateful for your teaching. I'm grateful for your teaching, Bante. My question is, I'm kind of new for the practice, and I'm struggling trying to understand how can we navigate through our own practice without being imposed upon by our Kalayamitta of how to do a certain thing. Like when my friend told me to not meditate and just practice vipassana by serving the sangha, serving the community, and I don't disagree with that, but I just wonder what is the meaning of vipassana, whether it's vipassana in meditation or vipassana in daily practice.
Yes, at least my own understanding of it is that one has to have a certain level of stability in the mind that comes from committed formal meditation practice for true vipassana to occur. So I wouldn't tell you not to meditate.
Right.
I would tell you to meditate.
And one more question, Bante. Whether if that's the case, then should we just practice alone rather than having Kalayamitta? And what is the meaning of sangha?
It is a good question, because we do need Kalyanamitta, and Sangha is the community of those who are practicing correctly, so that it's not just the monks and the nuns. Lumpur Ganha, a nephew of Lumpur Cha, describes the Buddha Sasana as being mindfulness and wisdom. He says whatever beings have mindfulness and wisdom, that's the Buddha Sasana. Sometimes they're wearing robes, sometimes they're wearing lay clothes. And but it's those qualities of clarity and truth-discerning awareness and wisdom that is Buddhism. So one needs to choose one's sangha. So sometimes if you're going somewhere where there's lots of rituals and lots of work and but there's not much practice and to support the growth of clarity, then maybe you need to choose a different sangha. But you need to we do need in the beginning stages spiritual friends and we do need some community to help us to practice. But you might need to shop around a little bit. So.
Thank you, Bhante.
And these days, it's possible to have online community. It's possible to join. For Ajahn Anand, for example, in Thailand, you can join his evening chanting every night by live stream, and question and answer sessions every Friday. So it's possible to hook up with good teachers.
Hello, Venerable. My question is related to consciousness.
Okay.
Yes. So, is consciousness really conscious in itself, or it is dependent? The consciousness, is it really conscious or dependent?
So to my understanding, it's arising due to previous conditions. So the fact that you have a human body is conditioned by previous actions. With this human body comes ear consciousness, eyes consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness. But you will have this experience of body and mind until you liberate yourself. So consciousness, I'm not sure if this is answering the question, but consciousness will continue in some form or other until you liberate it. So we have to do that.
mention some word for consciousness like chitta,
Yeah.
and sometimes it is mentioned
So I
as
use
vijnana,
mind.
sometimes as vijnana, sometimes as mana.
So I think the best way to understand it, because the descriptions are like a map. We need to have some kind of a roadmap so that we know how to try to train ourselves. So, but the best way to experience, in my experience, the best way to experience mind is meditation. Like when you meditate a lot, you will know when your mind is peaceful. You will know what a good quality of awareness is experienced as. And then I think that's the best way to learn about consciousness and awareness is meditate a lot. So I think we've run out of time. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So wonderful that we could hear this blessed teaching under the sacred Bodhi tree. And for those of you who would like to know more about some of these questions, Ajahn Achalo will be teaching again on December 8th. So please return back on the 8th evening at 7:30 for at the next Dhamma talk that he'll give. On behalf of all of us, on behalf of the Sangha, we offer just a small gift of our great appreciation for hearing the Dhamma tonight.